So as Michael said, thank you for coming. It's a small group, which is actually great, kind of an intimate conversation. And I have some slides we're going to go through, but it is absolutely a conversation. So stop me, you have a question. I kept all these slides high level, but I'll talk to them in a little more detail. But if one of the questions or topics interests you more, let's dive down that hole. It's definitely meant to be able to bounce back and forth with ideas and really get to the meat of the kind of questions that y'all are interested in. So don't worry about stopping me. And there is no bad question. I also will certainly have some things I can't talk about because we have companies we work with or whatever that we may have non-disclosure agreements with. So if I have to skirt around some stuff, it's only because there's some confidentiality requirements for a few things. But really glad you're here. So and I do like the small group. So feel free to chime in. My background, just so you would know, give a little more history on me. I'm the director of MAAP, but also I'm a pilot and mechanic. I actually grew up wanting to fly airplanes since I was a kid. Started flying when I was about 14, 15 years old. Got my pilot's license like the day I turned 17. And so been in aviation for a long time, became an aircraft mechanic, and then got into flight test. So I got a master's degree in working on flight testing of all kinds of different manned aircraft. Then I was out in the industry for a while dealing with light sport aircraft. You're familiar with that, which is kind of one of the newer generations of manned aircraft. And then we moved to academia when a friend of mine called me and said, hey, can you come teach at the university? And at the time it was Middle Tennessee State University. And I went there and then started a UAS program in 2010. So relatively early on for UAS or drones. And then moved out to Kansas when I was recruited out there. So I moved out to Kansas State University for 3 years. And then came over here to Virginia Tech. Started in August of 15. So just a little over 2 years now. And took over as the director about a year and a half ago. So some more relevant background though. When we have AUVSI here, I serve on the board of directors for AUVSI. Was elected to that about 2.5 years ago. I also serve on the advocacy committee for AUVSI. I was up here actually this week with the Hill Day, going around and talking to different congressmen. I serve on the board of directors for the Unmanned Systems Association of Virginia, which is a new association looking at how to improve UAS trade in the state of Virginia, and have several other roles, including serving as a chairman of ASTM F-38, which is a standards body. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but I'm a subcommittee chairman for flight operations. So definitely engaged quite a bit in the industry. But any questions about my background before we get going? I don't know if you
What standards are you working on in ASTM right now?
So my subcommittee is flight operations. And so within flight operations, we have ones that are currently in active draft are a maintenance standard, some maintenance requirements, which we have one that's already been published. We're revising that standard. And then we have a operations over people standard, which is really about the process of gaining approval to operate over people. And then we have a couple more that are in development that we haven't announced yet. As far as ASTM broader goes, including the F-3801 committee, we have a lot of standards on designing and building aircraft, parachute systems, actually probably about 12 different topics, software reliability. There's a whole nother list of them, but quite a few. Yes, sir.
Is your pilot's license and A&P still current?
No, the pilot's license is not current right now. I haven't been flying much since the past couple of years. So A&P is still current, yes.
Do you have a UAV operation, authorization from the FAA?
Well, I'll do that through the pilot's license if I need it. So you're talking about like a Part 107 license? I would fly underneath our COAs using my pilot's license for that. But quite honestly, I have staff that do all the flying now. Unfortunately, I don't get to do much of the flying myself anymore. But I am a very proficient RC pilot as well. So, okay, so let's just go. And I want to make sure you all know who we are, MAAP. We are, as I've been mentioned a couple times, one of 7 test sites. These were selected back at the very end of December 2013. They're geographically dispersed across the country. New York, North Dakota, Nevada, Texas, New Mexico, Alaska. Most of these, or several of these, have other states with them. So like Alaska has Alaska, Oregon, and Hawaii. New York has Massachusetts and Wisconsin, I think, or Michigan. But there's the lead is New York, is the one shown on the screen here. So we've all kind of taken a different approach to the test sites, and we can talk and be happy to answer questions about test site history and where we're at. But we've all taken a little bit different approach to the problems of integrating unmanned systems. For instance, North Dakota has really great wide open flat spaces. Virginia doesn't have as much of that. So North Dakota is doing big agricultural projects. We're focused more on the urban environments and operating in congested areas, congested airspace, things like that. But our real strength and our real value proposition that we've developed, our strategy, you might say, is to be able to leverage not just the test site, but also Virginia Tech and the research engineering power that's at Virginia Tech with operational capability of the test site. So not only do we have a very strong engineering school, we have a very strong operations capability. So you match those two together, plus the FAA relationship as a test site, we're able to do some really cool research. We'll talk about some of those things. So there is a very synonymous tie between the test site, Virginia Tech, and the FAA in this relationship. And since we were created back at the end of 2013, we have flown the most flights of any other test site. I don't have the top numbers, the most current numbers on the top of my head, but I know we're roughly twice as much as any other test site, several thousand missions in the past 2 to 3 years. We did the first, package delivery that was approved by the FAA. We did Google's first, or say X's first, commercial package deliveries. We've done numerous first flights of large aircraft and small aircraft, so a lot of groundbreaking type operations. We fly everything from little tiny, like 50-gram aircraft all the way up to 900,000-pound UAS. So it's not just small stuff and it's not just big stuff. And we are, I'll refer to ourselves as MAAP from now on, but the Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partnership actually started out as New Jersey, Virginia, and Maryland. It is now primarily Virginia, and we partner with our other states for specific projects where we need to, their additional expertise or facilities.
What happened with Maryland?
Well, basically, we found out that we worked contractually better if we just contracted to each other to use facilities than it was to try to have a formal structure in place ahead of time. So still have a great relationship, great folks, great company, and we still work together on projects, absolutely. Any questions on what the test site does? Okay. All right, so the point today we're going to talk about is really that, and you probably all know this, but I want to reiterate on it, that the drones are going to change our daily experience. The question is when, and we're going to talk about the when and why. We know they're going to change our experience, and it might be through package delivery, so it might be through receiving your burrito or your mail or something else to you directly, and I think this is actually one of the ways that the average citizen or public will interface directly with the drone, will be through delivery. And that's, the value proposition becomes real when you realize you can get a package delivered to you in 20 or 30 minutes versus 2 to 3 days. That is a very real, tangible benefit that people will see in the very near future. But there's a lot of other applications, and I'm sure you're aware of many of these. Right now, this is very important. Insurance claims, damage assessment. Look at Harvey and Hurricane Irma. I think the comment was made last week by a couple of people at Interdrone that Harvey was probably a watershed moment, milestone event for drones because they were literally flying all over the place. Hundreds and hundreds of flights authorized by the FAA to support emergency operations from search and rescue all the way down to damage assessment, roof claims, all that stuff. We have millions of claims that are going to have to be processed. We can do it much quicker with drones than we can walking around or floating around in a boat, either way. So I think you'll see even more press coming out of that, but Harvey was the first major national emergency where we've seen large volumes of aircraft, of drones, flying for good and doing great things. Traffic management, that's another tangible one. I just picked a few examples. We could go on forever about applications, but this is one of those ones where people haven't seen it as much yet because the current regulations don't necessarily allow you to do this. This picture is actually from a closed test facility at Virginia Tech, but just the ability to go out and assess traffic conditions or after a wreck or accident, clearing the road. There was a recent study done by North Carolina Department of Transportation that estimated basically an 80% reduction in road downtime, road closure time, by using drones to determine accident forensics. So you really very well may see a change in your experience because your commute may not get as bad because of drones. So these are direct impacts to people.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
You said current regulations don't allow. Can you talk about that? What regulations are you talking
So Part 107, which we'll get to a little more in a minute, allows visual line of sight operations, but not over people and not over moving vehicles. I guess you could argue that vehicles that are sitting in traffic may not be moving, but when the current regulation will not allow you to fly over those like a highway or over people. Because cars are parked, people might be outside the car anyway. So that's the regulation that prevents you from flying over and doing traffic management now.
Is that federal regulation, state regulation? Or
FAA, so it's federal.
federal?
Yep. Yep. So
What is I hate to keep asking questions on
No.
this, but
absolutely.
is there a movement to undo that regulation?
That's exactly what we're going to talk about. So I'll dive in more detail on Part 107 in a minute, but at the same time, I want to make sure that we address this up front. Part 107 is the FAA's new rules that came out on August 29th of last year for small unmanned aircraft. And this was the first rule that allowed commercial operation of UAS, but it has a lot of restrictions on it, which we'll talk about how that impacts these applications. And one of these is you can't fly over cars or people, or moving vehicles or people. Yes, ma'am.
Back on the Harvey subject,
Mhm.
you said it was kind of like a watershed moment for drones doing good. Do you think, so like the Texas DPS outcry for please stop flying your drones in our work areas, we're trying to save people with helicopters. What impact do you think that had?
So there was negative impact also, and this actually was brought up yesterday in several discussions. Same thing's going on right now in Oregon and Montana with the fires, the wildfires. What makes the press is the do not fly thing. I think the DOI has a campaign that says, if you fly, we can't. That's kind of their slogan. And that makes a lot of press because that's the negative side. But what doesn't make the press is the literally 10 to 50 times as many good flights that are authorized that happen at the same time. It's not as sensational, perhaps, I guess. So yes, that was an issue in Harvey. We had some issues with aircraft coming in that are having trouble landing because a drone's flying that's not supposed to be there. And we'll talk about ways to mitigate that. But I would also say, literally, there was probably 100 times as many good things going on that were authorized, and we're able to help out and save lives. So it's like any technology, there's pros and cons, and we really need to get the regulations in place to help smooth that process.
That's kind of like maybe hobbyist versus commercial, government, or public operations kind of thing.
Yeah, that's usually what happens is the hobbyists or the people that buy one down at Best Buy or something that don't know all the regulations that end up going out and causing problems. I have a pilot on my team who's also a medevac pilot, and he's had a situation where he was at a crash scene with a patient in the helicopter, had landed, they loaded the patient, critical patient on the interstate, and he couldn't take off because there was a drone hovering right in front of him. He also flies drones for us too. But so he's seen that impact, so this is potentially risking this person's life behind him. So appreciate that there's issues, and that's why we're trying to help solve some of those. And a lot of it's going to be education. We'll get to that more, but a lot of education and some technology mitigations too.
Would you elaborate on what was authorized and what was not and where?
In Harvey?
In Harvey?
So I haven't seen, or the FAA hasn't published a full report yet. The best person to talk to on that would be Robin Murphy at Texas A&M. She led a team from CRASER, which is an acronym I'll never be able to remember for you. They did 120 flights, I know, around the Houston area, up and down through there, but the FAA hasn't released official statistics. We also know that several insurance companies, I think Allstate and Farmers Insurance, maybe some others, were flying, doing damage assessments and claims work. But nobody has published yet a comprehensive list of all the activities.
But it was only Robin Murphy's team that was authorized?
Oh, no. So Robin Murphy would say she's a good contact because she was in the search and rescue mode. But the insurance companies, the Texas test site, a whole bunch of other groups were public agencies. There were several local, county, and state public agencies were flying. Those are just the ones we've heard about. We know that the FAA has publicly said they authorized hundreds, and far more than they ever have, of flights down there after Harvey.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is authorized, are we talking about emergency responders with drones? Are we talking about the aerial equivalent of the Cajun Navy? Is the Cajun Air Force? I mean, are these hobbyists who are authorized in an emergency circumstance?
No, most of these are either search and rescue or public safety entities or commercial operators that have companies that provide services. I think a good example would be like Hazon Solutions in Virginia Beach. A Virginia company went down, and they are a Part 107 operator, and they were authorized by the FAA, I believe, to fly down there. So these were professional operators, not hobbyists. They had to file for permission from the FAA to fly within the temporary flight restriction, the TFR. Yeah. And then, I throw this in there, the personal air transportation is actually real, believe it or not, and is becoming one of the hottest things out there. We have seen just a tremendous growth in investment from Uber and other companies where you might eventually have someday, and I could use this today, your Uber app where you want to go from point A to B and you select air or ground, and you might hop in a drone with no pilot and go via air to your next location. Imagine how quickly you could go, across DC with that. Is it, going to be here tomorrow? No. Is it going to be here in 10 years? I think yes. You're probably going to see that. You're going to see personal air transportation where you have aircraft that are certified to carry passengers and do that relatively autonomously. So that's one of the more on the horizon type of use cases that we're looking at. But you talk about how is it going to change my experience as a human? Well, welcome to the Jetsons, because that's what it is, and it is coming. There are a lot of challenges which we can dive into to making that happen, but there's been some huge technology issues that have come up, or technology solutions that have come up. Probably the biggest is called distributed electric propulsion, where you have electric motors that are distributed throughout. That's one of the key enablers. And then autopilots, and the autonomy aspect has gotten very mature. But we have to certify something like that, and we'll talk about certification more in a minute. But I just wanted you to see these are the ways that we're going to interact as public people with drones. They're going to change our experience, without a doubt. And I love this quote from Mike Toscano, the former president of AUVSI. He says that drones are revolutionary technology on an evolutionary path. And that is absolutely true. And I'd say we're at some of those jumping points now. We're hitting the major changes in the evolution right now. Harvey might be one of those. Before that, Part 107 that came out last year was one of those evolutionary jumps. The next ones are going to probably be beyond line of sight and ops over people, a few different things. But this is going to keep evolving and keep growing, and it's definitely going to revolutionize a lot of our lives. So let's talk about the market. This is there's just been tremendous expectations for the drone market. Everything from an $82 billion forecast that came out from AUVSI in 2013 that's saying there'll be $82 billion worth of the market over the next 11 years from 2015 to 2025. That's an older study. Some more recent ones, $17.5 billion in a 5-year period from Goldman Sachs, or $100 billion globally. $73 billion from Teal Group just this year in global drone production, so just the manufacture of drones. And $127 billion of value to drone solutions for different industries, which might be the value of what the drone brings to oil and gas, pipeline inspection, and other things. So it's what is that offset or that value that it brings, not just what does it generate. So huge numbers. Everybody's throwing around, tens of thousands of jobs, big economic impact. It's all coming. You've probably heard this before. And that's what kind of what I want to talk about, though, is we, to date, haven't hit this yet. We haven't hit the $82 billion mark. By any means. And so my question is, why hasn't the market met the expectations? Some people say it's been overinflated and perhaps the market's not really there. I would say it's almost been underinflated, but we just haven't gotten quite to the next stepping stone. In fact, I would call it maybe we're on a delayed fuse to the huge explosion of market growth. And the key piece here really is what the current regulation allows. So I'll refer to this as Part 107. This is the small UAS rule that came out last year. It's what everybody's flying under right now commercially, pretty much everybody. But it has some key limitations that are preventing this market growth that we've seen. One is, one of the biggest, visual line of sight only, so you can only fly this where you can see the aircraft. 2, daytime only. The picture here is actually at night, was flown underneath a different type of authorization. Not over people. That's actually probably the biggest problem right now, because once I go beyond line of sight, once I go where I can no longer see my aircraft, I'm almost definitely flying over somebody, or I have no way to know if I'm flying over somebody. So I have to be able to fly over people most of the time before I could fly beyond line of sight. There's a few exceptions. You could fly out over the ocean or over some, really remote places, but by and large, you're going to have to fly over people when you go beyond line of sight. And this one isn't talked about much at all, but it actually is going to be a huge impact. Part 107 does not apply to what's called air carriers. So it's one of those little known things right at the front of the rule. There's in the applicability statement, it says this does not apply to air carriers. What is an air carrier? Traditionally, an air carrier is an entity that transports goods or people for hire. So what does that include? All the airlines, Delta, American, all of them. We've got cargo carriers, FedEx, UPS, even some charter flights, chartered aircraft that are flying on demand. They're all carrying goods or people for hire. So this rule doesn't enable you to fly goods or people for hire in a air carrier situation. And there's more definitions to that. It gets, that's designed as a business model. There's exceptions to air carrier rules, but long story short, you can't do the widespread package delivery under Part 107 because of the applicability statement up front. Notably, the other pieces of this are waiverable, so you can waive the visual line of sight requirement. You can waive the daytime only operation. You can waive the not over people thing. So you gain permission to do those from the FAA. There's a process for that. You can't necessarily waive, in fact, I know you can't waive the air carrier restriction. And just so you know, there's more tied up into the air carrier than just FAA. That's actually a commerce issue. So there's commerce issues, transportation of goods across interstate lines. There's a lot of issues that come when you start doing hire operations for hire.
Explicit in Part 107 what restrictions they're allowed to waive or not?
Yes, Part 107 2.205, it gives you a list of these are the things you may waive. And interestingly, it says you can waive daytime only rule. You can waive the operations over people or prohibition of operations over people. You can waive the visual line of sight requirement, but not for the carrying of goods for hire. So the one exclusion there is you can't waive visual line of sight for package delivery. So that's another gotcha there. So Part 107 is definitely not designed for package delivery in its current state. Now it can be modified, but in its current state it's not designed for that. And we're talking about why the market hasn't met expectations. Certainly all these restrictions dampen that ability to meet those, or to meet those needs for the industry. So a couple other things, and this is just some expounding on what I just talked through a little bit. We're missing some key enablers, the beyond visual line of sight, the ability to operate beyond visual line of sight. The picture here on the left is a test we did out in Central Virginia, which was a beyond line of sight test. We did it under the test sites authorizations with a couple companies, AeroVironment and Legato Networks particularly. But we could not do that flight under Part 107. That's part of our research plan, which we'll talk more about in a bit. Operations over people is probably the other big key enabler. And one I haven't mentioned yet is the automated traffic management. And so some of you all probably heard about the NASA unmanned traffic management, NASA UTM. What that is basically a low altitude air traffic control system for small aircraft. Drones cannot be detected by, most drones can't be detected by the radar that the FAA currently has installed. They're too small, the cross section is too small. And not only that, we don't have enough air traffic controllers to handle the expected volume. So let's say we have 1 million drones flying at low altitude across the country. We don't have 1 million controllers or even 100,000 controllers to control those. So we need some type of solution for this low altitude traffic management to keep them from hitting each other that's automated. They're at least mostly automated. And we'll talk through some of our research in that topic as well. It's really been driven by NASA, and now it's being transferred over to the FAA slowly as a new plan for them to integrate. And we'll talk about some of the hurdles that need to be overcome there. But those are really the 3 of the biggest pieces: beyond line of sight, ops over people, and then automated traffic management. Yes, sir.
In terms of operating over people, places like DC, it's obviously difficult to fly. I don't think you can fly like in the rural vicinity of DC because there's so many people. So what do you think it's going to take to get to a point where operations in places like DC or New York or places like that is more feasible to fly from?
So we'll talk to that some, but the big key pieces are, first you got to show that you're not going to hurt somebody. And how are you going to do that? What causes you to hurt somebody? Why has the FAA not allowed this to date? Basically, they want to know either A, you're not going to hit somebody, period, no matter what, which means they need guarantees the aircraft will not hit someone. That's one option. B, they need a guarantee that if you do hit somebody, you won't hurt them. So we're talking small aircraft made out of special designs. So that's another possibility. They don't want you to cause injury. Or C, you're going to operate it in such a manner where it's impossible that you're going to hit someone. Like you could argue that across certain spaces in an urban area, you could fly building to building to building and never actually be over a person. You're in a very urban environment, but there's no people directly underneath you. So basically they want guarantees you're not going to hurt someone. So what's it going to take? It's going to take proof of one of those things. And the question right now is, what is the bar? How much proof does the FAA need before they say, yes, that's okay? And even the FAA, I don't think, knows in certain cases. And we'll talk through some of the research on that too. But those are the big keys. Any other questions? Okay, so what is the holdup? And I think this will answer some of these we've had. 3 other big issues. Security concerns, which is going to dominate a good bit of the next discussion. Safety assurance. How do I know I'm not going to hurt someone? And then technology maturity. So how do I know that technology is going to work like it says it's going to work every time and do what it says it's going to do every time? So let's talk about security concerns. Right now, this is the biggest issue that we're dealing with in our industry. And a year ago, it wasn't even on our radar, no pun intended. It really wasn't on our radar. I mean, it had been addressed and brought up as a topic, but we didn't really fully grasp, I think, the significance. The question with security is, how do I know whose drone is flying above me or above someone? Is it there for legitimate reasons? I mean, is it supposed to be there? Is it doing good things? Is it interfering? And does the operator have approval to be there? How can I verify that in the industry? How can the FAA verify that? But also, how can local law enforcement, and how can you as the public? You see an aircraft flying over your backyard, is it coming to deliver your package or is it spying on you? So what's it there for, and how can the general public know that? And then where is the operator located? That's one of the biggest challenges right now. You might see a drone doing something bad, but you have no clue where the person operating it is at. So you've got to have an issue of how do I know where to go tell that guy to stop doing what he's doing. This all came about because, it's been brewing for a while, but really it became a major issue in January of this year. The FAA was preparing to release a new rule that would allow operations over people. So they were going to put out this rule that said you had to do this to fly over people. And that went through the FAA's process, went through the Department of Transportation, and then it was elevated to the White House and above. And we had basically get stopped because of security concerns. DHS, DOD, law enforcement, everybody else said, wait a second. As soon as you start operating over people, we have no way of knowing. Right now, if someone operates over a person, they know that person is not supposed to be there. But as soon as we start allowing it, how are we going to tell the difference between the good and the bad guys? So that stopped that rulemaking and basically said, we're going to wait and solve this problem before we go any further. So what's the holdup right now with the industry? Right now, the holdup really is this topic. So the FAA created a rulemaking committee, an ARC, an Aviation Rulemaking Committee. It started about 2 or 3 months ago for remote identification and tracking. What that committee is a group of industry professionals, FAA, other law enforcement stakeholders, Department of Justice. I mean, it's a pretty large group. Get together and are making recommendations to the FAA of this is what the rules should look like to solve this problem. And that ARC will be submitting their final report on September 30th, that's their due date anyway, of this month. So at the end of the month, they should publish a recommendation for these are the things that the FAA needs to do to solve this problem.
And that report will be made available when?
Usually they're pretty quickly available. Sometimes they come, the day they submit them, they come out, but I'm going to guess this one will probably be reviewed before it's submitted, but hopefully relatively quickly. In that report, we've seen ARCs generate reports that are 2 pages long. We've seen ARCs that generate 100-page long reports. Something tells me this is going to be a longer one. It's actually a really hard problem because, especially that we need to be able to identify the aircraft in all situations. It's probably not going to be a single solution. It's going to take more than one thing. Like people are talking about using strobe lights on an aircraft. It's like coded, so you can point your phone at it. You can see what the code is in the strobe light, and then your phone would then read that out as a code. Normally manned aircraft do this through traditional means, just having a big number on the side of them. They have an N number that's a foot tall, and if it's low to the ground, you'll be able to read it, throughout. The problem is these aircraft are too small. You simply cannot read the registration numbers on them. So we've got to somehow share that information with everybody without being able to see it visually. So we've talked about, there's been strobe lights discussed, or LED lights that are coded. There's been talk of using the unmanned traffic management system. Potentially, if all these aircraft are flying in this traffic management system, then you should be able to look up and reference that to some kind of air traffic control system. There's talks about using ADS-B, or a signal that's broadcast from the aircraft on radio waves that you could pick up with some device. But realistically, how does John Q. Public read an ADS-B signal? Probably not going to be too easy. So it's not an easy problem. It's probably not a single solution. We'd probably have a multi-technology solution, and there might be different requirements for different size aircraft. But it has to be work on everything. It has to work on everything all the way down to the real small aircraft. There's probably some bottom threshold where you're not going to hurt anybody, period. but all the way up to large aircraft. Big question right now is, does it need to apply to hobby, recreational drones, or not, or just commercial drones? So that's a legal debate, because the Congress has a rule or a law that says you cannot place any additional rules on hobby aircraft. That's a whole other day's discussion if you want to get into that. And then the solution is going to have to be developed before we can go to the next level beyond line of sight or anything else. So this is key. So what are we doing at Virginia Tech to solve some of these things? These are high-level bullets, and I'm happy to dive into them. We're testing new technologies. We have been testing UTM systems that have this capability to remotely identify and have different outputs that different users could see. We've tested ADS-B systems. We've tested other radio navigation systems, radio transmission systems, transponders. All of these in partnership with industry. So these are companies that come to us with a solution and help. We go out and test them and see how well they work. That is also leading to some of the standards development we're doing. I mentioned ASTM earlier. So my hope is that ASTM will be tasked with a responsibility of developing a standard or requirement for this. Since we lead some of the groups in ASTM, we'll be involved with helping to write those standards as well. And then also just talking to communities. So we've talked with our local communities, and we'll continue that even more, just trying to understand what their concerns are, and then trying to relay that back to the FAA.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
Standards development can take a really long time.
It can, yes, absolutely it can.
So once the FAA makes a decision, and then we're talking about developing standards to do this? Is that
That's the ultimate goal. We want to get to standards. Whether or not they'll be available immediately or not is a question, but standards can also take a very short amount of time. We've published standards as fast as they have to go to ballot for 2 months. That's the minimum time frame. But we've had a team write a standard in a week, ballot it, address the comments, and publish it like 90 days later. So they can happen fast if they're high enough priority, and I would say that this is one of those topics that's very high priority. The question is going to be, is the standard going to be very controversial or not? And it depends on how much of a slam dunk that standard is as to how fast it goes. What I expect we'll see is probably a scaling of standards. So we'll see a very simplified standard up front. That'll be kind of the first stepping stone, and then it'll get more detailed and more detailed as the technology progresses and as we learn more. But without standards, how do we know that any particular thing does what it says it does without some kind of requirements? Yes, sir.
Is there any, in terms of identification, remote identification, are there any technologies that particularly stand out above any others?
Well, I don't know that I want to promote anybody's product, but I don't know. I think there's some really good viability to low-tech solutions. There's either RFID tags or actually I think the LED light thing has some merit to it. But we'll talk more about this in a second. We're talking about cooperative aircraft that they're willing to share their location information. So the UTM system, if fully implemented and mature, I think it's also a very viable solution. It might be 5 years away from being real, and we need a solution now, not in 5 years. So I mean, it may become that, but it's very clear that there is no one stone kills all. I mean, that's become very apparent. So I was asked a question by actually a guy from CNN. I gave a presentation, and when they had just announced this rulemaking committee, and he said, and I was up with a panel, and they asked the panel, tell us what you think the magic solution is, the magic bullet for this problem. Impossible question to answer, but my same response was the same then, that it's probably multi-layered solution. There's probably going to be several different things, and it's going to take a lot of testing to figure out what works best. So I don't know, it doesn't always answer that. Yes, ma'am?
Testing new technologies, what kind of industry partners are you working with? Are we talking like traditional avionics, or are we talking, I don't know, like UAvionics who specialize in drone stuff?
Both, I would say. More on the drone side, though. I mean, we did a test recently with NASA, and we had partners from Google X, or just X, Intel, Android Technologies, Fordham Radars, Fordham Technologies. Most of those are drone-focused companies. I'd say they've been the priority, but what we're starting to see is some of the more mature, old guard aviation companies are also really investing in this. We're seeing Airbus is jumping into unmanned. They were silent for a long time on the topic. Rockwell Collins is really getting into the comm side of things. So historically, a lot of our testing has been on the drone space, startups or companies that are launching new initiatives. we're starting to see the avionics companies coming around. I actually wouldn't be surprised to see some of the big players in the avionics community jump into this. And Rockwell is a good example, but there certainly are others too. Yes, sir.
In terms of security concerns, there's also concerns from just average citizens who don't want to sit in a random flying drone flying around them. So a lot of police departments, like when they get a new drone, they'll like demonstrate it in front of the community, stuff like that. How important do you think that is in terms of pushing some of this stuff forward to show people that these drones are for good, not for negative reasons?
So community acceptance, I think, is a huge issue with this, and it's even beyond any technology solution we might develop. We might have the world's greatest technology solution for remote identification, but if the community doesn't accept it, it's still dead in the water. I would never, ever, 2 years ago, say the word drone. I mean, you would not get me to say that, other than to say drone means bad things happening overseas, and we use the term UAS, or unmanned aircraft. But that connotation has changed a lot because people have started to see the good things. So now we do start using that, and I'm fine with that term because the connotation has changed. I think that shows a growing public acceptance, a community acceptance, but it's still got a long ways to go. So if I were a public agency starting up a program, that's absolutely the first thing to do. Is the worst thing that can happen is not share any information, and suddenly you see a police drone flying over your backyard. I mean, that would be horrible. In fact, where I come from, I came from Nashville. That was my hometown. And this back in 2009, they bought a couple drones, didn't tell anybody about it, and were starting to figure out what they want to do. And then suddenly the public found out they had a drone program that they weren't talking about, and it was a PR disaster, an absolute PR disaster. I think Seattle had a similar issue at the time. So yes, when if people are implementing a UAS program, I think it's very much vital that they start to share what the purpose is. And the purpose is not to go out and covertly surveil some homeowner who's growing marijuana in the backyard. The purpose almost always is to support either a SWAT team, or somebody that's trying to save a life, or search and rescue. I have a friend at Mesa County Sheriff's Office out in Colorado who's flown probably more public safety or law enforcement missions than anybody else. I think 90% of what they did was, a elderly person walking away from a nursing home or something and going missing, or search and rescues for children. It was definitely not the covert surveillance topic. So I think communication is absolutely one of the big pillars. Other questions on remote ID? We can come back to it if we need to later too. I want to talk about another security concern, and that's counter UAS. So let's say we have an aircraft that we don't think is good. If we think it's a threat, how do I stop the aircraft? And how do I detect it first, actually? The remote ID only really works for cooperative aircraft. We say cooperative meaning that they're willing to transmit their information out cooperatively. So remote ID does not work for the actor or the bad actor who is trying to do something harmful. So how do I find those? And then how do I stop them? And who has the authority to do so? This is becoming a bigger issue because now we're starting to see stuff out of the Middle East. ISIS is using drones, small drones, commercially available to do very bad things. So we figure it's a matter of time before that comes here at some point. So how do we stop them, or see them first, then how do we stop them? But here, the interesting question I have about the authority is right now the FAA, and for the foreseeable future, classifies UAS as aircraft. And there's a federal law that says it is illegal, it's a federal crime to harm or bring down an aircraft. So by federal law, my local law enforcement cannot bring the aircraft down. So if they have an issue, they're legally they can't bring the aircraft down. So the question is, how do we get them the authority to do that if they do see something bad going on?
But right now, fail-safe for a drone would be to land. That's not the same. Landing, triggering a land command so that the drone isn't damaged. Is that considered that as opposed to taking a shotgun and removing it permanently? So
I think the law actually says harming or interfering with the operation. So I think that comes under the interfering rule. So yes, it would still be classified as not authorized. So that's a basic tenet, obviously focused on manned aircraft. You're not supposed to interfere with the operation of the manned aircraft. I think I have another slide on this though, but yeah. So what we expect is that to detect those non-cooperatives is some kind of active surveillance, a radar. There's other spectrum sensing things where they can sense the spectrum coming off of the aircraft. In the picture here, this top left one is a radar we bought that's built for this purpose, for detecting small UAS. It's remotely deployable. You can set it up rather rapidly. And the bottom right is a electro-optical camera that when it gets a signal from the radar, a track from the radar, the camera can turn and look at the aircraft from, it's got a huge lens on it, so from like 5 miles away, 3 to 5 miles away, you can see that aircraft and at some point tell you what kind of aircraft it is. It's just some of the technologies out there to detect it, so we need some kind of active means to do so. But then how do we mitigate it? How do we command it to land or bring it out of the sky through other means? So you could jam it. Well, that causes spectrum issues with the FCC. Anybody doing jamming that's not the DoD is an issue. Or how do we tell it to do something? Or there's other mitigations. You may have heard of it. I don't know if you've heard of this or not. Over in Norway, I believe it was, or the Netherlands, they're training eagles to go catch aircraft, small drones, and bring them down. And they're actually very good at it. And then they fly out there, they put their claws on it, and they bring it straight out of the sky.
We need video of that.
Yeah.
We need video of that. There's some good video somewhere. There's others that are like shooting nets at them. So there's a solution where a guy on the ground has a net, he shoots out of a gun. But there's also another solution where another drone has a net cannon on it that flies over and shoots it over. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways to do this. But regardless, the point is we need a reliable method to do so. And this is really a big issue around airports. You think about a drone flying through Atlanta airspace or Dulles or something else, right in the middle of the busiest time of day, there's a potential significant risk of a collision with manned aircraft. So how do we get the FAA the authority to bring down aircraft or anybody else? Even the FAA doesn't have that authority. So right now there's legislation that's been proposed. Some of it's made it through, I think, the House to reform some of the laws about bringing down aircraft. Some Title 18 reform, looking at giving the authority to do this to DHS and DoD. But that's an issue. Just be aware of, is that who has the authority to bring it down once we know it is a bad aircraft. So, go ahead.
What about like local police or, I mean, I'm just.
Who's the boots on the ground? Who's yeah.
Scenarios, and I would imagine my local police department, they would want to get rid of one of these things if it was a security threat or
Mhm.
involved.
That's the real problem. Is DHS or DoD going to be the location where the bad aircraft is going to be, or does their technology work where that location is? How does law enforcement get the authority to stop it? And that's exactly what's needing: is who has the authority, and how do they get clearance to do that? You know, there's
Right now they don't have the authority?
no. I think if say an Arlington police officer sees an aircraft flying unsafely or doing something very bad, they don't have the authority to bring it down, to interfere with it.
Are there any known examples of that? Of somebody perhaps wanting to down a drone and not, or deciding not to because they couldn't get the okay from the FAA or DoD or somebody?
The only examples I know of that are in the testing environment that we're in. Like, we want to test some of these things, but we can't because of the approvals. But I haven't heard about like a local group doing this. And as with a lot of things drone, there's so much new here. There's some case law really needed. You know, there are the instances of homeowners shooting them down with a shotgun. And have any of those people gone to a jail yet over that? I don't believe so.
How about
You know,
prosecutions? Has anyone been prosecuted?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, been several prosecuted. To be quite honest, I don't have on the top of my head the results of what all those have been, but most of them have either been settled through some method, or the person shot it down won for one reason or another, some technicality. But regardless, there has been some prosecutions on it. So what we're doing, though, in this area is we're test sites. We're evaluating that new technology. I mean, I just mentioned some of the equipment we purchased. Actually, we bought these in June, so this is new developments. But really, working with the federal stakeholders. So we're funded. The university is funded by groups like DARPA and the DoD and others, DHS, to do research on what are the best solutions. And some of the way we're looking at this is even how can we use autonomy or even artificial intelligence to defeat these things. And that's really a more fundamental research problem, looking at, that the university is looking at. But there are, I think there's some ideas that are existing about how we can use autonomy to defeat autonomy. And that gets into a lot more technical detail than we probably have time for today. But regardless, the interesting thing is, as a test site, we do as much testing, well, not as much probably, but we do testing of enabling good uses of drones, and we also do how do we stop them. Both are needed. It's the same way the reason we have cybersecurity for your computer, but computers also do great things too. I'm looking on time. Oh, I'm about out of time. Better keep going here. So, all right. We have a hard one stop.
You guys are having a great conversation. If you guys, we're going to go over past 1 o'clock maybe. If you need to leave, leave. But
Okay.
as long as you're good, Mark, keep talking. It's fine with you.
All right.
I certainly understand if anybody needs to speak up.
Yeah. I apologize. I only have. We'll roll through these relatively quickly. So, the other big one I mentioned was safety assurance. By that I mean, how do I know this thing is safe to operate over people or beyond line of sight? How do I certify that? What are the standards, the requirements? And how do I know when I can trust autonomy? That is a big question, is trust and autonomy. We're actually hosting a conference in a couple weeks on this very topic. Well, actually it's October, I think 16th or something. Trying to understand how we can certify and trust autonomy. So the big issues there is we need the design standards. We need to know what the requirements are. We need training when we're not talking about autonomy, or even when we are, to try to reduce human errors. We need methods of demonstrating reliability and risk mitigation. The work that you see here, that is a real plane or helicopter or multi-copter, crashing into a dummy. That's work being conducted by our institute looking at injury biomechanics of drone impacts on people. So we're flying Phantoms and other aircraft into an instrumented test dummy to develop a test method to determine when something is safe and when it's not safe. In a practice facility, actually. So I have a video in a minute that'll show an overhead shot of it looking down. But yeah, we wanted to do this indoors, first of all, because we're purposely destroying drones, and what the FAA thinks about that we'll deal with later. But the other thing is we needed a sterile wind environment because we're trying to fly a very straight path. So we flew it inside an indoor facility. And we need a big space. We happen to have a really nice practice facility for our football team. There's perks to being at Virginia Tech. Regardless, this was earlier work we did, just trying to set the baseline of how you do these tests. Now we're doing a lot of work with individual companies, looking at their particular airframe, what's the risk of that aircraft hurting you in all of the possible conditions. And then we're also looking at mitigations. If I put a parachute on that, how does that affect this? How does it change it? And then how do I certify the parachute? If I put airbags on, if I change the design of the aircraft, the shape of it, the weight, all these variables, we're looking at how we can evaluate risk to humans. This goes back to operating over people. How do I make an impact safe? And we're not talking about whether or not the aircraft comes out of the sky in this case. We're talking about whether or not the impact is safe at that point, if I assume I hit somebody.
The FAA has a ground impact report, right, but not a...
They have Assure released a ground collision severity report from Assure is the Center of Excellence for UAS, and we're actually teamed with them as well. It did look at human injury, mostly through simulation with some testing, but it also looked at hitting buildings, cars, other structures. There's other work that's in development on this topic, more detail on human impact.
And then is there going to be an aircraft impact, like drone aircraft?
They've actually done that research already. So what happens when a UAS collides with a manned aircraft? The FAA hasn't released that report yet. So it has.
But it exists.
It's been completed. I can't speak to it because it's not my program, but Assure did complete a project on air-to-air collision severity, including air to structure, like the wings or the windshield, and air to engine, and ingestion through a turbine engine and other things. So.
Not the hijack, but I'm pretty sure the UK's CAA has about that.
Yeah, so the UKCA put a report out especially about looking at helicopter impacts too, windshields, windscreens. That's actually some pretty good data. We've actually used it to support some of our results as well too. But anytime you run a steel and lithium-ion battery through a jet engine, you can imagine the results are probably not going to be great. So my assumption would be it's not going to go well. So safety assurance, that's what it requires. And just again, what are we doing? We are very heavily involved on the standards development for this, especially operations over people, writing the test methods. We have lots of good things coming up on this topic within the next few weeks, so keep your eyes out. The risk to human impacts, that studying is going to keep going on. And then the one thing I haven't talked much about is the test site does, and actually it's probably our main business case now, is we're building safety cases with the FAA, with industry, for new applications. So it could be the package delivery application, it could be another one. We have a company that wants to do operations over people or beyond line of sight. We as the test site help them build the safety case to the FAA. That's said, people hear the word safety case in my industry a lot, I don't necessarily know what it means. What we're saying there is we basically describe exactly what they're going to do. We do a huge assessment on risk. What is the risk? All the possible bad things that could happen. And then we have to mitigate those risks, each and every one of them, and mitigate it to where that risk is acceptable. We may not be able to eliminate the risk entirely the aircraft comes out of the sky. We can reduce it down to an acceptable level. I mean, there's always a risk that a 747 is going to come out of the sky too. And then we go out and we test to verify that our mitigations work, and that's our safety case. Our safety case is based on risk, and then validating our mitigations to that risk. So that's actually a lot of what we're doing, especially with safety assurance these days, is building safety cases that are based on risk and have data to support them. Yes, sir.
I'm still trying to figure out how to ask this question exactly. How much of the work that you guys are doing is practical versus theoretical, I guess?
I'd say 95% practical. The vast majority of what we do is, so Virginia Tech, don't get me wrong, I guess, I'm talking about the test site in that case. Virginia Tech has a lot of fundamental research going on that is very theoretical and very early stage. So, artificial intelligence for swarm control of many hundreds of aircraft and stuff like that, that's very early stage theoretical. What the test site is doing is working with industry partners, that have real applications they want to do tomorrow. So that's very practical, very applied.
I'm sorry, I should have said
Yeah.
applied, practical versus hypothetical, rather. So the crashing, for example, would be a hypothetical thing, but the practical would be working with the company to mitigate safety effects if they're planning on making it on tomorrow.
So I would say you have to do the hypothetical to be able to do the practical. You have to be able to know what the worst case scenario is to be able to mitigate it. So in that case, I still consider this to be practical. Is it likely that I'm going to hit somebody that perfectly right in the face with a Phantom? No, it's not practical, but I need to know what that worst case scenario is so that I can mitigate it. So it's very much a practical application, but we're looking at things that have odds of 10 to the minus 6 or 7th of 1 in a billion chance of happening. The only way to know what happens when that does happen is to test for it, even though it's very low odds. A lot of what we're trying to do is prove a negative. We're trying to prove to you this won't happen. So because of that, we end up having to test very improbable things, if that makes sense. All right, one last area, and I'll keep this one a lot briefer. Technology maturity. We always say that the technology is being held back by the regulation, but don't get me wrong, there is some technology that is not ready for prime time yet. So there's technology out there that it's not ready, we have technology that doesn't meet a design standard that's changing or whatever else. There's no reference whatsoever to the pictures on that topic, so don't take that reference about package delivery. I'm just talking about the fact that there's some technologies, especially unmanned traffic management, that it's so early stage, it's not ready yet to solve the remote ID problem. I think it's a great potential solution for it, but it's not ready to do it yet. So some technology needs to mature more before we can certify it and prove that it's reliable. So yes, the technology exists, we just need it to become more mature. Detecting and avoiding other aircraft, that's one of the hardest things to do. How do I see another aircraft and then avoid it? A manned pilot does it with their eyeballs, but with a drone you don't have eyeballs on the aircraft. So the technologies for that range from radars to transponders and other things. None of those have been well proven yet to always avoid other aircraft. And so there's a lot of work in that space now that we need to do. And that's another key enabler, is avoiding other aircraft. That's what enables beyond line of sight operations, big time. So the work that we're doing there, same story, same line. Only thing I guess I would add is that we're trying to develop these new test methods specifically with the FAA for some of these technologies, for the airborne radars. How do I validate that radar works every time for that purpose? The FAA's never done that for this type of application. So we're actively communicating back and forth on how to validate some of the technologies. Sometimes we're validating things for industry standards groups. Other times we're validating for the industry. In this case, we're talking about validating for the FAA and helping to develop some test protocols there. And then all this is based on risk. That's one thing that I'd like for you to get out of this, is that the work that we're doing is all to mitigate risk. And down to a level that the general public will be willing to accept it. So we don't plan to eliminate all risk, but we plan the risk to be no more than the average person experiences every day or less. No more than other aviation out there. here's my little video. It's your little eye candy. So you want to see the crashes from above and see the facility we were at. You can get that from, I think there's an aerial shot right at the beginning from above, looking down. On the left is when Project Wing came out and did their first test of their commercial package delivery system. They delivered Chipotle burritos, and I think I gained 5 pounds that week, or those few weeks. But it was very good. And it was still warm when it showed up. But the next steps, this is the broader picture. What do we need to do next? We need to understand what the bar is. We need to understand the requirements. So we need standards, but even before we need standard, we need a basic requirement. I always like to say that the FAA will set the bar somewhere, even if it's too high. That's okay. We'll meet it as industry, and then we can work on where that bar is at later on. But right now, we don't know where that bar is for operating over people or flying beyond line of sight. So understanding what the requirements are, then doing test and evaluation of different technology and processes, and then from there we can start expanding operations incrementally. We're not going to get just a blanket approval to fly over New York City. It's going to be approval to fly over some place that has a higher density population than an empty field of corn. And then the next step will be to go more and more populated. So we expect the expansion of operations to be very methodical and take a little bit of time before we get to the ultimate use case of operating over a stadium full of people. But all that starts with developing requirements. And the thing I want to leave you with is that the main conclusion is I do believe that the market will realize the potential that we looked at earlier, the billions and billions and billions of dollars. But there are some regulatory and technology hurdles that may slow the timeline, and potentially some community acceptance hurdles. But that market is coming. It just may not be on the timeline. So the people that say that the market hasn't met the potential or the expectations that have been proposed, yes, I agree with that. But I think it's simply because we haven't had the ability to quite get there yet. And there's legitimate reasons for that. I'm not saying those are not legitimate reasons. The FAA is being methodical because we want aviation to be safe, and that's okay. So with that, that's my contact information, but I'm happy to answer any random questions you have, except what the football score was last week, because I don't probably know. We won. I know that.
I'm curious about we didn't have a chance to talk much about personal transportation, and people's trust in having these UAVs flying around. I mean, the picture of the thing that you showed was, I think, the EA one.
Mm-hmm.
4 big rotating blades, which if that thing crashes, that's bad. And I guess one question I have is, we've heard about the flying car and personal transportation stuff before. We've been hearing about it since practically the 20s.
Yep.
So why has the technology coalesced as it has, and what do you think the objections, technological, political, are that you haven't talked about there that would apply to personal transportation stuff?
Good points. Certainly the flying car has been around. I mean, there were prototypes of flying cars back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s and stuff. And it's never taken off. No pun, once again. But I'll say there's a few things. I do think the technology has changed dramatically that would enable this. And I mentioned the distributed electronic propulsion or distributed electric propulsion. That is actually huge. We're talking about simplifying systems. We're not talking about flying, hours and hours away. We're talking about flying, 5-10 mile hops, short hops. That type of technology makes those hops commercially viable. We're not having really expensive engine overhauls, turbine overhauls, or having lots of noise, etc. So the short hop mission that makes this commercially viable from a business perspective becomes feasible with distributed electric propulsion. Then the autonomy aspect of it makes it feasible to not have to have a pilot flying one person around each time. So there's some economic things that the technology has changed. There are a lot of questions and a lot of problems, or not problems, challenges, shall we say, that we have to overcome, and trust and certification of those is chief among them. Certainly the exposed rotors, I think Workhorse is a company that has a prototype out of a similar aircraft, and it has the basic same configuration, but the propellers are right here. And the door is right here. And it's okay, I understand the propellers are not supposed to turn when I'm outside, but just walking in is obviously a very big issue with having propellers that are this big around at head height, even not crashing. So I don't think the personal air transportation vehicles of the future will probably look like what we see today. I think these are interesting prototypes to help develop things, but they will probably change and evolve, and you'll see much more safety-friendly designs. So that, and then another thing is I think there's more money and more interest behind this than ever before. You see the Ubers of the world and others that have the kind of capacity to build these things, to invest in the long term, going after it. Instead of, you look at the 60s and 70s, a lot of those companies were like one-man startups that made a prototype that looked like a flying saucer with a bunch of engines in it. That's totally different than having a multi-billion-dollar company with major programs. Airbus has a prototype. There's quite a few of them. So technology changes, the economics are feasible. I think community acceptance is more feasible for this topic. People would want to get places faster, and then you have the investment opportunity there.
Okay, and I realize it's pretty early yet, but has the FAA talked about certifying any of these things and how they're going to treat a vehicle that's manned that doesn't have a pilot?
I believe that there are actually some of these that are in certification programs now.
Part 23 is one of the things that FAA has eye on for flying car stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, so the interesting thing is Part 23 was recently rewritten.
Right.
And so Part 23 is the rules for design requirements for aircraft. And it had stayed the same for decades. And it wasn't really well able to handle or adapt to new technologies. The FAA recently rewrote those rules entirely to be performance-based requirements, which basically opens up the door for new ways of solving old challenges. It used to be the only way you could solve some challenges was to use a certain type of technology just because of the way it was prescribed in the rule. But the new rewrite actually makes it much more feasible to get there. I think you'll actually see a whole host of new aircraft. Cessna's still making the 172 that they built in 1947, and they're still making basically the same airframe now, because it was certified underneath a previous regulation. But now with the new regulations, I think you'll see entirely new novel designs coming out that people had never even imagined before. But there are, I'm quite confident, but I don't have evidence to give you that there are aircraft, personal air transportation aircraft in the certification process. That doesn't mean they'll be approved in a year or two. They might be approved in 10 years because some of the processes take that long. But FAA is actively trying to consider how they're going to certify it, and companies are actively trying to understand the requirements to certify them. So a lot of times, in certification, they start that process with a concept. Is this feasible? If so, how are we going to certify it? And they do ask all these questions, and then that concept evolves during the certification process. The thing that's ultimately certified is the final test article. So it might be 5 years down the road or 8 years down the road. But absolutely, it's being looked at heavily right now. Yes, ma'am.
How come we don't hear a lot about maintenance when we talk about drones and tech kernels?
That is a great question. And my background is as an A&P mechanic and very passionate about that topic. You don't hear a lot at all. I think there's several factors for that, I think. One is what the market primarily consists of right now is small electric vertical takeoff aircraft like the DJI, Phantoms and stuff, where basically a pre-flight or just looking at the aircraft and pre-flighting it is, you've looked at everything you can possibly look at. There's not much to it. There's not engine maintenance required because they're electric motors. There's very little you could do in the field to adjust them at all. And quite honestly, they're remove and replace, or you just throw it away and pull another one out. They're more disposable than before. You look at the military. There actually is a lot of emphasis on maintenance in the military, mainly because they're flying more complicated systems, internal combustion engines and others. What we're starting to see now is an increased emphasis on this topic as people want to fly beyond line of sight and over people. This goes back to Part 107, doesn't allow you to do that, so who cares about maintenance? If it falls out of the sky, it's not going to hit anyone, theoretically. And so the reliability doesn't really matter. When I'm flying over people or I'm flying beyond line of sight, now maintenance becomes a bigger issue because reliability is needed. So there's two issues. One, I think the technology was really simple, and two, we haven't had to prove reliability. Now, when both of those change, when we get more complicated aircraft and we need to prove reliability, maintenance becomes a big issue. And so that's why we have a maintenance standard at ASTM that we're continuing to evolve. We've learned a lot in the past 2 or 3 years. There are companies starting up, actually there's one been around for a while called Robotic Skies.
Yeah, Brad's a good friend.
Yeah, Brad's a great guy. He's actually a co-chair of my task group on this maintenance standard.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so, but they don't really have any competition. I mean, they've developed a network of repair stations to support maintenance, but they don't have a competition yet because nobody else has really seen the need for it. I think I told him that his idea was a fantastic idea, maybe just a few days early. But at the same time, that's the way you can get market presence, is you capture the market early on. So my prediction would be you'll see an increase in maintenance emphasis in the next couple of years as we start to go to these expanded operations. And as when people now can fly beyond line of sight, they need an aircraft that can go 10 hours or several hours. The DJI Phantom will no longer suit. So you look at bigger aircraft, more complicated engines that have more maintenance requirements. And I passionately believe that that's going to be a key. So, yeah. Other questions at all? I'd say it's interesting as a test site. We get to see a lot of diversity of products. I mean, 10 different solutions to the same problem. That's kind of a cool place to be. We get to see new technologies. We work a lot with end users too. So some of our customers are not the people making the stuff, but the people wanting to use it for certain things. We're working with them to get the approval to use it. So if in the future you have random questions about some new application or some new technology, there's a good chance we've interacted with it in some way. So absolutely call me if you have any questions, and I'm happy to answer what I can answer. So.
How about the drone park?
The drone park. We get what
The drone park.
one of the things Virginia Tech is building, which I didn't have a slide on, is an outdoor netted facility. It's a 2.88 million cubic feet enclosed space. Basically it's a huge golf net with a roof on it. It's essentially the size of a football field, 300 feet by 120 feet wide, but it's 80 feet tall. It's by far the tallest one in the country. We're a test site, we're doing all this research. The question is, why do you need a net? You can get an FAA approval to do a lot of stuff. Well, I would argue that a lot of the more early stage things we're trying to research, we cannot get an FAA approval for. I can't get FAA approval to put an aircraft out there and let it fly for 10 days with no person involved. Just walk away, it takes off, flies and lands and recharges and takes off and does all that autonomously. I can't do that under current FAA rules. I can't do swarm technology with lots of aircraft doing crazy things under the current FAA rules. That's a big factor. We can do new things, we can innovate there, but it's also a big opportunity for students that are in classes. You wouldn't believe the number of engineering students we have that are doing drone projects. We have roughly 12 to 1,500 freshman students every year, and last year I know at least half of them did a drone project. So we had 900 students, something like that, doing a project on drones. And so they were building an aircraft and had to go fly it somewhere or changing something out. And so what happens is the students don't have a place really easily accessible nearby they can go fly. We have an airport that sits right next to campus, and literally the runway goes right over campus, aims right over campus. So they have to go out of town somewhere to go fly. So this way they can literally walk out of their classroom, walk down a little beautiful walking trail and hop in the cage and go fly their projects. So it's a space for us to do innovative research. It's a space for students to play around with their projects and develop and innovate things. And it's also, we'll probably host drone races and do other things out there, have some fun activities so third parties can come in and use it. We're going to use it for some of our destructive testing as well. We're hitting, crashing stuff, impacting things, dropping parachutes, just a more controlled environment. But anyway, if you're ever in Virginia Tech, down in Blacksburg, you ought to come see the. And if you want to hit golf balls, it's a great place to hit golf balls too. You don't have to worry about losing it. You're not going to go out of the cage. So.
Do you do demos, like media demos?
We have done a few in the past.
See something.
Come down for the ASTM meeting. We're hosting ASTM's actually first major workshop in November 7th through the 9th, I believe. And we'll be doing some demonstrations with that. We'll have events every once in a while that the public can come to. I know that the ASTM one is one that there'll be activities going on there, demos that people can probably see.
We can talk Mark into it, we'll do something.
yeah. Now that we have yeah. But at least with a cage, the risk is mitigated that something really bad would happen. So it might be more reliable to do more demos. But yeah, I mean, we'll have opportunities in the future. Any other questions? Well, I appreciate your time. I really do. I know it's a small setting, kind of really tight and close here, but I really appreciate having the opportunity just to discuss with you, and happy to walk through any questions you have in the future too.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, thank you. Thank you very much.